Hello. Happy New Year, everyone. Right? It's the new year now. I think the last time I talked to everyone was on the 31st. So, Happy New Year, Sharkies. I love that picture that you sent me. I showed it to a few people. It's 2022, says Farmhouse. Yes. Yes, it is now 2022. Oh, and we have a puppy. Licking his lips behind me. Waiting for this moment. Happy 2022, puppy. Oh, he's a little low. Wait, there's more. Moved the box out of his space. I didn't move his bed. We'll see whether he uses his bed at all. No, avoiding it. Why don't you use your bed? No. I'll have to practice it with him. Show him that it's a nice, comfy, safe spot. It's my stream. Keep refreshing on this window. Hey, there I am. I think I saw Robot Kyo in the chat as well. It says he's there. Also someone named Lori Pub. Don't recognize that name. Hello. Extra More. Capsips 06. Caxips. Yeah. Those are some names I've seen before. Whether they're people, maybe. How's everyone's 2022 been so far? Have you had an exciting year? All 5 days of it? Spent a few of them out in Chilliwack with friends. That was a lot of fun. Played some games, watched some goofy programs, television or movies, I suppose. I remembered this film that I had watched when I was very, very young. I don't know exactly how young. I know it was prior to grade 3, but I don't know how far prior. But it was something that I had rented or something at some point and just watched on repeat because, that's how kids do. Is this angled? Looks a little tilty. Oh, maybe it had adjusted itself. Alright. Well, that's the new normal now. Anyways, it was called The Wizard of Speed and Time. So that was on YouTube, so we watched that, and I'm thinking, it was, I think, filmed in 1989, this movie that we watched, but I think it was based on a short film from 1979, and I'm guessing that what I saw when I was a kid was the short film from 1979, because I remembered aspects of what we saw, but not most of it, and I don't think that what we watched was exactly what I had seen before. Sharkies have nothing too new happening except for school being pushed to next week. Oh, hey, you watched Only Murders in the Building. Awesome. Did you? Well, if you watched all of it, then I assume you enjoyed it. When we were watching it, we watched it when it was coming out, so we only got one episode a week. So we weren't able to binge watch the whole thing at once, which, wasn't so bad. It was fun and looking forward to the next episode. Sometimes that's all right. Oh, yeah, speaking of weather, Farmhouse mentioning the weather, yeah, we had a snowy drive back from Chilliwack yesterday. We left Chilliwack, and part of it was electric car problems. Our car gets less range when the weather's bad, and we also did some extra driving in Chilliwack. So the battery was a little low, so I wanted to make sure we charged up before we tried the whole trip back. So we stopped there's a supercharge station in Mission at the Superstore. So we stopped there to charge up, but it was a blizzard out, so we were also driving pretty slow. So we left Chilliwack before 5:30, and we got home after 9 p.m. So it was a bit of a long trip. This whole thing is mostly pandemic related. Yeah, that's unfortunate, but understandable. we were helped somewhat by when we left Chilliwack, it was like -2 degrees, and when we got like past Mission, it was up to like 1 degree. So the temperature actually went up by like 3 degrees, which helped, I think, our car's range a little bit. Robot Kyo says Energy Quest 2022, and is here and listening, just making some food. Well, Happy New Year, Robot Kyo. Yeah, it was a fun trip. I don't know, it wasn't so bad. We got something to eat, and we weren't, I think, any of us really stressed out too badly. It was just kind of a, it's going to be a slow drive, and sometimes that's all right. Not like we were in any huge rush for any reason. And we watched Con Air with Nicolas Cage, which I had actually not seen before. I'd seen lots of like memes and jokes about Con Air, and I had a rough idea of the plot, but I never actually watched it. It was campy and really dumb, but it was entertaining. There was a lot of like laughing at just some of the random shots, Nick Cage like smiling while his hair's blowing in the wind, just really randomly and things like that. And we watched Waterworld, which I've seen many times, but our friend Eriker had not seen before. Which honestly, I think that, I don't know, if you've never seen Waterworld, like it's actually it's a campy, 90s action movie, for sure. But it's well done. Like the production is impressive. The massive sets and like the makeshift technology and all that. Like they did a good job on it. Even if it is like a campy action movie. It's got some questionable treatment of women and things like that, but I think also it is aware of that. Like, it's not perfect. It's not good. Like, women get treated badly, and sometimes that's treated as a joke in that movie. But also, I think that the characters are all aware that the people that act that way are being not good. Yeah, it didn't do too well in theaters either. Sharky's commenting on how it was expensive to make. It did not, I think, we were looking at the numbers, and I don't think it made back its budget. I don't know whether I know that there have been like lots of like Universal Studios shows, live shows, and I don't know whether it made back money in the long run. We actually saw the Waterworld live action show at Universal Studios in Singapore. Oh, was that what it was? Oh, right, with overseas markets, it like barely made back its money. Something like that. But yeah, the live action show we saw in Singapore, which was great. It was like, and it's so funny that that's still going. It's got to be what, in the 90s? So that's like 30 years ago or something. Probably a little less than. I hate to say it. I'm sorry, everyone. But yeah, that was quite entertaining. Explosions and jet skis and things, and people falling off of tall structures into the water. But yeah, I enjoy that movie. I've watched it quite a few times, as I said. And we played some Smash Bros. Robot Kyo. Here, have this banana. Pew! I keep thinking about that moment and laughing. Here, have this banana. Family snow day? Does that mean you're going to go out in the snow? Build some snow folks? Make a Calvin and Hobbes snow scene. Make as unsettling snow people as you can. Oh, and we played this game called, possibly be out in the snow, depends on how easy it is to traverse. We played this game called It Takes Two, which I think recently won a bunch of awards. Like, it might have been Game of the Year for some people last year and things like that. Um, it's like a two-player asynchronous gameplay type thing. So, like, each of you has your own character. It's about these parents, this mom and this dad, that are having relationship problems, and they are going to have a divorce. And their daughter gets really sad and wishes on this like relationship help book that they would be friends again. And then she cries, and somehow her tears transport them into the bodies of her little clay and wooden dolls. She doesn't really know that, but then her parents are adventuring to try and get back to their bodies. And so you play as each of her parents as they're dealing with their relationship problems and like going through their shed and yard and things on a tiny scale, trying to get back to their house. Um, and it was very interesting. It had some really grim moments where they're dealing with these like bizarre magical beings and things that are going on, and like some of it got weirdly dark. If you wish listed it, I'm not going to say anything more about the plot. Like, that's just sort of the beginning and introduction of the game that I've talked about there. You had to tell Izzy about that. What did Izzy think of that? Uh, yeah, yeah, it had some dark moments. Like, the game was entertaining and fun. And it had dark moments, but they were presented in such a surreal and, like, goofy way that you were laughing while being horrified, kind of. They felt like we did about it, yeah. You should maybe, like, you should show Izzy a video of it or something. Like, find someone that's put up a Let's Play or something. Oh boy. It had lots of Easter eggs and things too, and lots of like every now and then you come across like a versus mini game somewhere out there, like where you compete against each other for no stakes, as far as I can tell. But yeah, it was fun to play. It was longer than I was expecting. We didn't actually finish it. Rokio thinks it feels particularly dark in contrast to the levity of the rest of it. Yeah, yeah, we talked about that a bit. Oh boy. Yeah, I'm not certain that I would want to have kids watch parts of that game, because even though they're sort of cartoony and lighthearted, they're still dark enough that I could imagine if I had encountered it when I was younger that it might have given me nightmares. Maybe, but maybe not. Maybe it's too lighthearted to be taken seriously enough. It's hard to say. Well, it's 7:15. I don't think we're going to have anybody else trickle in at this point. Don Bluth. Yeah, yeah, that seems maybe accurate. That could be a correct assessment. Um, I think I could compare the darkness of it to some of the Don Bluth stuff. So how about this book, huh? I'm looking forward to getting back to it. It feels like it's been a little while since we've read, even though it's only been, what, like 5 days? We only read like half a chapter last time, so we're still midway. I don't think we even read half a chapter. We only read like 4 pages. I guess 6 pages. So we're midway through chapter 10. We are on page 124 or so. Um, and See, they made it to Kamar, and Aunt Pole declared that they were no longer putting on a bad face in front of people. They were going to stay in the best inn in Kamar. And so at the gate, she declared that she was the Duchess of Erat, and demanded to know where the best inn in town was, and that was the Lion. And so they got directions to the Lion from the guards. The fellow's manner irritated me, Aunt Pole said loftily. And that's roughly where we're at. Farmer says, yeah, we haven't read a book this whole year. Ugh, I haven't read a book since last year? That's not true. I did read some with Ereker. Did the Sharkies or Robakio, did any of you read any Xanth books when you were younger? By Piers Anthony? The first one was A Spell for Chameleon. I feel like they were pretty pervasive for a while. I read a lot of them. No? You're not missing out, to be clear. I'm not asking because I like these books. I did like them when I was in middle school. Since then, I have realized that the author, Piers Anthony's writing and moral outlook is pretty trash. And Ereker and I were reading the first book just to laugh at how bad it was. Sharkies haven't subjected their kids to the never-ending story yet. Not ready to break their hearts to that level at this age. That's fair. Land Before Time has some rough moments, yeah. Yeah. The Xanth books are weird because they're for kids, for sure. They're definitely marketed like they're aimed to children. The land of Xanth is this sort of fantastical, magical land on Earth, but it's like hidden from the rest of Earth by a magic shield. And everyone in Xanth has a magic talent that they're born with that's unique to them, of vastly differing power levels, and no two talents are ever the same. So the spot on the wall variety of talent might be literally being able to make colored spots appear on a wall, versus like a magician class talent, as it's known, is something very powerful. And the books are full of puns. Puns are like an integral part of Xanth. But Piers Anthony is a chauvinistic piece of trash, and has some real gross, just views baked into his writing. And it's stuff that I feel like, I just didn't notice as a kid. And also, I was less educated then. I was less informed, and my worldview was different, right? I am not upset with past Anthony, for having read those books. And enjoyed them and whatever, because there were things in them that appealed to me. And there were things that I didn't notice, like I just wouldn't have known at the time were wrong. Pharma says it's not all the worst ever, but a lot of it is just awful to the female characters. Yeah, and it's written in such a way where that attitude towards the female characters isn't, it's presented as normal. So I think that makes it harder to notice, because the narrator is basically, the overarching view is telling you that it is okay. And so I think that makes it harder to pick up on the fact that, hey, wait a second, this isn't okay. What's happening here? Sorry, I just noticed the light on my flash was like... The light on my mouse was flashing at me, and I couldn't figure out why. I'll look into that later. Yeah. Sharky say back then we were also so used to casual misogyny in our media. All assumed it would always be there. Yeah, for sure. And there's lots of reasons. The world has changed and progressed, and I think a lot of that is for the better. Oops. I just lost my OBS by accident. There it is. But yeah. Anyways, so long story short, I don't recommend reading the Xanth books to anybody. I would not recommend them. When I was younger, I might have, but I would not now. But we were reading them knowing all that, and just read like the first few pages just to see, like, to go back and laugh at how bad it was. And just in like the first 2 pages, it was pretty bad. It was pretty bad. Just like by the second page, the main character was already objectifying a female character and like taking shots at females, which I think we've talked about the word females here before, maybe, but that was used. The females. Ugh, God. Anyways, I got sidetracked. Long story short, I did read a book this year. I read some of a book this year, but it wasn't a good one. So let's get to a good book. Let's go back. So I'm gonna get back into it. I'm gonna find where we were. I think I know roughly the line we left off on. And let's continue chapter 10. On a similar note, once the world returns to allowing social hangouts again, we need to watch bad movies with us again. Yeah, that would be fun. That would definitely be maybe one of our drink nights or something like that. That'd be a good time. There's something in my hair. I think I like partially brushed it out. It just moved lower. All right. Ready? Okay. At Customs Square, Silk accosted a busy-looking merchant trudging across the snow-covered paving. "You, fellow," he said in the most insulting way possible, pulling his horse directly in front of the startled merchant. "My mistress, the Duchess of Erat, requires directions to an inn called the Lion. Be so good as to provide them." The merchant blinked, his face flushing at the rat-faced man's tone. "Up that street," he said softly, pointing. "Some goodly way. It'll be on your left. There's a sign of a lion at the front." Silk sniffed ungraciously, tossed a few coins into the snow at the man's feet, and whirled his horse in a grand manner. The merchant, Garion noted, looked outraged, but he did grope in the snow for the coins Silk had thrown. "I doubt that any of these people will quickly forget our passage," Wolf said sourly when they were some ways up the street. "They'll remember the passage of an arrogant noblewoman," Silk said. "This is as good a disguise as any we've tried." When they arrived at the inn, Aunt Pole commanded not just the usual sleeping chambers, but an entire apartment. "My chamberlain there will pay you," she said to the innkeeper, indicating Mr. Wolf. "Our baggage horses are some days behind with the rest of my servants, so I'll require the services of a dressmaker and a maid. See to it." And she turned and swept imperially up the long staircase that led to her apartment, following the servant who scurried ahead to show her the way. "The Duchess has a commanding presence, doesn't she?" the innkeeper ventured as Wolf began counting out coins. "She has indeed," Wolf agreed. "I've discovered the wisdom of not countering her wishes." "I'll be guided by you, then," the innkeeper assured him. "My youngest daughter is a serviceable girl. I'll dispatch her to serve as her Grace's maid." "Many thanks, friend," Silk told him. "Our lady becomes most irritable when those things she desires are delayed, and we're the ones who suffer most from her displeasure." They trooped up the stairs to the apartments Aunt Pole had taken, and stepped into the main sitting room, a splendid chamber far richer than any Garion had seen before. The walls were covered by tapestries with intricate pictures woven into the fabric. A wealth of candles, real wax instead of smoky tallow, gleamed in sconces on the walls and in a massive candelabra on the polished table. A good warm fire danced merrily on the hearth, and a large carpet of curious design lay on the floor. Aunt Pole was standing before the fire, warming her hands. "Isn't this better than some shabby wharf-side inn reeking of fish and unwashed sailors?" she asked. "If the Duchess of Erat will forgive my saying so," Wolf said somewhat tartly, "this is hardly the way to escape notice, and the cost of these lodgings would feed a legion for a week." "Don't grow parsimonious in your dotage, old wolf." Parsimonious? Parsimonious? She replied, "No one takes a spoiled noblewoman seriously, and your wagons weren't able to keep that disgusting Brill from finding us. This guise is at least comfortable, and it permits us to move more rapidly." "Oh, thank you for spelling the word out to me again, Farmouse." Yes, I did just read that. I see. Wolf grunted. Sharky say, "The way the sentence is written, I read it at first, that staying in the cheap inns makes the group reek of fish and unwashed sailors, not that it's the inn that's reeking." It could be both. Could be both. Probably is both. Wolf grunted. "I only hope we won't regret all this," he said. "Stop grumbling, old man," she told him. "Have it your way, Pole," he sighed. "I intend to," she said. "How are we to behave, Mistress Pole?" Dernick asked hesitantly. Sharkies, "Don't rub yourself on unwashed sailors, as the proverb goes." Yep, that's right. The proverb I just made up. Don't rub yourself on unwashed sailors, or you'll smell like a fish. Her sudden regal manner had obviously confused him, Dernick. "I'm not familiar with the ways of the gentry." "It's quite simple, Dernick," she said. She eyed him up and down, noting his plain, dependable face and his solid competence. "How would you like to be the chief groom to the Duchess of Erat, and master of her stables?" Dernick laughed uncomfortably. "Noble titles for work I've done all my life," he said. "I could manage the work easily enough, but the titles might grow a bit heavy." "You'll do splendidly, friend Dernick," Silk assured him. "That honest face of yours makes people believe anything you choose to tell them. If I had a face like yours, I could steal half the world." He turned to Aunt Pole. "And what role am I to play, my lady?" he asked. "You'll be my reeve," she said. "The thievery usually associated with the position should suit you." Silk bowed ironically. "And I?" Barrack said, grinning openly. "My man-at-arms," she said. "I doubt that any would believe you to be a dancing master. Just stand around looking dangerous." "What about me, Aunt Pole?" Geryon asked. "What do I do?" "You can be my page." "What does a page do?" "You fetch things for me." "I've always done that. Is that what it's called?" Don't be impertinent. You also answer doors and announce visitors. And when I'm melancholy, you may sing to me." "Sing?" he said incredulously. "Me?" "It's customary." "You wouldn't make me do that, would you, Aunt Pole?" "Your Grace," she corrected. "You won't be very gracious if you have to listen to me sing," he warned. "My voice isn't very good." That's a good line. "You'll do just fine, dear," she said. Pharma says womp womp. "And I've already been appointed your Grace's chamberlain," Wolf said. "My chief steward," she told him. "Manager of my estates and keeper of my purse." "Somehow I knew that would be part of it." There was a timid rap at the door. "See who that is, Geryon," Aunt Pole said. When he opened the door, Geryon found a young girl with light brown hair in a sober dress and starched apron and cap standing outside. She had very large brown eyes that looked at him apprehensively. "Yes?" he asked. "I've been sent to wait upon the Duchess," she said in a low voice. "Your maid has arrived, Your Grace," Geryon announced. "Splendid," Aunt Pole said. "Come in, child." The girl entered the room. "What a pretty thing you are," Aunt Pole said. "Thank you, my lady," the girl answered with a brief curtsy and a rosy blush. "And what is your name?" "I am called Donia, my lady." "A lovely name," Aunt Pole said. "Now, to important matters. Is there a bath on the premises?" Aunt Pole's got priorities. It was still snowing the next morning. So I look out the window. The roofs of nearby houses were piled high with white, and the narrow streets were deep with it. "I think we're close to the end of our search," Mr. Wolf said, as he stared intently out through the rippled glass of the window in the room with the tapestries. "It's unlikely that the one we're after would stay in Kamar for long," Silk said. "Very unlikely," Wolf agreed. "But once we've found his trail, we'll be able to move more rapidly. Let's go into the city and see if I'm right." Farmos agrees with Aunt Pole. "It's cold, you're riding all day. Bath." Yeah, I agree with that. After Mr. Wolf and Silk had left, Geryon sat for a while talking with Donia. Donia? Donia. I like the sound of Donia a little bit better. Who seemed to be about his own age. Although she was not quite as pretty as Zubret, Geryon found her soft voice and huge brown eyes extremely attractive. Well, Geryon. Things were going along well between them, until Aunt Pole's dressmaker arrived and Donia's presence was required in the chamber where the Duchess of Erat was being fitted for her new gowns. Since Dernick, obviously ill at ease in the luxurious surroundings of their chambers, had adjourned to the stables after breakfast, Geryon was left in the company of the giant Barak, who worked patiently with a small stone, polishing a nick out of the edge of his sword, a memento of the skirmish in Muros. Geryon had never been wholly comfortable with the huge, red-bearded man. Barak spoke rarely, and there seemed to be a kind of hulking menace about him. So it was that Geryon spent the morning examining the tapestries on the walls of the sitting room. The tapestries depicted knights in full armor, and castles on hilltops, and strangely angular-looking maidens moping about in gardens. Arendish, Barak said, directly behind him. Geryon jumped. The huge man had moved up so quietly that Geryon had not heard him. "How can you tell?" Geryon asked politely. "The Errands have a fondness for tapestry," Barak rumbled, "and the weaving of pictures occupies their women while the men are off denting each other's armor." "Do they really wear all that?" Geryon asked, pointing at a heavily armored knight pictured on the tapestry. "Oh, yes," Barak laughed. "That and more. Even their horses wear armor. It's a silly way to make war." Geryon scuffed his shoe on the carpet. "Is this Arendish too?" he asked. Barak shook his head. "Malorian," he said. "How did it get here all the way from Meloria?" Geryon asked. "I've heard that Meloria's all the way on the other end of the world." "It's a goodly way off," Barak agreed, "but a merchant would go twice as far to make a profit. Such goods as this commonly move along the North Caravan route out of Gar Og Nadrak to Boktor. Melorian carpets are prized by the wealthy. I don't much care for them myself, since I'm not fond of anything that has to do with the Angarax." "How many kinds of Angarax are there?" Geryon asked. "I know there are Murgos and Thulls, and I've heard stories about the Battle of Omimbre and all, but I don't know much about them, really." "There are 5 tribes of them," Barak said, sitting back down and resuming his polishing. "Murgos and Thulls, Nadraks and Melorians, and, of course, the Grolims. They live in the 4 kingdoms of the east: Meloria, Gar Og Nadrak, Mishrak Akthul, and Cthul Murgos." "Where do the Grolims live?" "They have no special place," Barak replied grimly. "The Grolims are the priests of Torak One-Eye, and are everywhere in the lands of the Angarax. They're the ones who perform the sacrifices to Torak. Grolim knives have spilled more Angarak blood than a dozen Vomimbres." Geryon shuddered. "Why should Torak take such pleasure in the slaughter of his own people?" he asked. "Who can say?" Barak shrugged. "He's a twisted and evil god. Some believe that he was made mad when he used the Orb of Aldur to crack the world, and the orb repaid him by burning out his eye and consuming his hand." "How could the world be cracked?" Geryon asked. "I've never understood that part of the story." "The power of the Orb of Aldur is such that it can accomplish anything," Barak told him. "When Torak raised it, the earth was split apart by its power, and the seas came in to drown the land. The story is very old, but I think that it's probably true." "Where's the Orb of Aldur now?" Geryon asked suddenly. Barak looked at him, his eyes icy blue, and his face thoughtful, but he didn't say anything. "Do you know what I think?" Geryon said, on a sudden impulse. "I think that it's the Orb of Aldur that's been stolen. I think it's the orb that Mr. Wolf is trying to find." "And I think it'd be better if you didn't think so much about such things," Barak warned. "Well." "But I want to know," Geryon protested, his curiosity driving him even in the face of Barak's words and the warning voice in his mind. "Everyone treats me like an ignorant boy. All I do is tag along with no idea of what we're doing. Who is Mr. Wolf, anyway? Why did the Algars behave the way they did when they saw him? How can he follow something that he can't see? Please tell me, Barak." "Not me," Barak laughed. "Your aunt
would pull out my beard whisker by whisker if I made that mistake.
You're not afraid of her, are you?
Any man with good sense is afraid of her,
Beric said, rising and sliding his sword into its sheath. Aunt Pole? Garion asked incredulously.
Aren't you afraid of her?
Beric asked pointedly. No, Garion said, and then realized that was not precisely true. Well, not really afraid. It's more... He left it hanging, not knowing how to explain it.
Exactly,
Beric said.
And I'm no more foolhardy than you, my boy. You're too full of questions I'd be far wiser not to answer. If you want to know about these things, you'll have to ask your aunt.
Pharma says, while I recognize that it's also just a good exposition technique, I do appreciate that the adults are willing to entertain Garion's questions as long as they're not too dangerous. Like Silk is willing to teach him the hand signs, and Beric is just answering his history-cultural questions. Not all adults are that kind to children. I wonder if it has to do with they're on this journey and they've got a lot of time together and not necessarily a lot to occupy every moment of that time. But, that said, I do agree with you. And I also appreciate that, I think I've kind of talked about that before, but I appreciate that they listen to him. At least somewhat. So you'll have to ask your aunt. Let me have a sip of my pomegranate and elderflower water. Humble brag. Pharma says, Garion, you respect her, but no, she'd never actually hurt you, but everyone else, pretty much fair game for her wrath given the right circumstances. You can also be afraid of someone that's not going to hurt you. Afraid of upsetting them. So, you'll have to ask your aunt. She won't tell me, Garion said glumly. She won't tell me anything. She won't even tell me about my parents. Not really. Beric frowned.
That's strange,
he said. I don't think they were Sendars, Garion said. Their names weren't Sendarian, and Silk says that I'm not a Sendar. At least, I don't look like one. Beric looked at him closely.
No, he said, finally. Now that you mention it, you don't. You look more like a Revan than anything else, but not quite that either.
Is Aunt Pole a Revan? Beric's eyes narrowed slightly.
I think we're getting to some more of those questions I hadn't better answer, he said.
I'm going to find out someday, Garion said.
But not today, Beric said. Come along. I need some exercise. Let's go out into the inn-yard and I'll teach you how to use a sword.
Me? Garion said, all his curiosity suddenly melting away in the excitement of that thought.
You're at an age where you should begin to learn, Beric said. The occasion may someday arise when it'll be a useful thing for you to know.
Pharma says, great distraction technique, Beric. Swords! Kids love swords. Well, Garion's at an age where he should begin to learn. Sharky say, classic kid managing. Late that afternoon, when Garion's arm had begun to ache from the effort of swinging Beric's heavy sword, and the whole idea of learning the skills of a warrior had become a great deal less exciting, Mr. Wolf and Silk returned. Their clothes were wet from the snow through which they had trudged all day, but Wolf's eyes were bright, and his face had a curiously exultant expression as he led them all back up the stairs to the sitting room.
"Ask your aunt to join us,"
he told Geryon as he removed his sodden mantle and stepped to the fire to warm himself. Before we move on, that was quite a bit with Barak, huh? I think that's the most Barak we've had. The most I've had to do that voice. So he's, I feel like we've gotten a little more depth to that character now. He's not just big man fight good. He knows a bit about the culture of the world. And also is apparently quite quiet when he wants to be. That's interesting, huh? I like the character development. My Barak voice is getting more distinct. Yeah, now that I've had a chance to practice a little bit, I think I got a little bit more of it. Yes, that is how Barak is spelled. Geryon sensed quickly that this was not the time for questions. Oh, look at that. I think that's a first for Geryon. Oh, and you can tell when I'm doing Silk's voice now. Yeah, Silk's is still, I think, the trickiest for me to fall into. Geryon's learning. Let's see. Geryon sensed that this was not the time for questions. He hurried to the polished door where Aunt Pole had been closeted with her dressmaker all day, and rapped. "What is it?" Her voice came from inside. That is, your chamberlain has returned, my lady," Geryon said, remembering at the last moment that she was not alone. "He requests a word with you." "Oh, very well," she said. After a minute she came out, firmly closing the door behind her. Geryon gasped. The rich blue velvet gown she wore made her so magnificent that she quite took his breath away. He stared at her in helpless admiration. Where is he?" she asked. "Don't stand and gape, Geryon. It's not polite." "You're beautiful, Aunt Pole," he blurted. "Yes, dear," she said, patting his cheek. "I know. Now, where's the old wolf?" "In the room with the tapestries," Geryon said, still unable to take his eyes from her. "Come along, then," she said, and swept down the short hall to the sitting room. They entered to find the others all standing by the fireplace. "Well?" she asked. Wolf looked up at her, his eyes still bright.
"An excellent choice, Pole," he said admiringly. "Blue has always been your best color."
"Do you like it?" she asked, holding out her arms and turning almost girlishly so that they all might see how fine she looked. "I hope it pleases you, old man, because it's costing you a great deal of money." Wolf laughed.
"I was almost certain it would," he said.
The effect of Aunt Pole's gown on Dernick was painfully obvious. The poor man's eyes literally bulged, and his face turned alternately very pale and then very red, then finally settled into an expression of such hopelessness that Geryon was touched to the quick by it. "Tapestries? Yes, this is a castle, and we have many tapestries." Honestly, I have no idea if I'm doing the right voice for that. It's been a little while. Aw. Yeah. Aw, poor Dernick. Silk and Barak, in curious unison, both bowed deeply and wordlessly to Aunt Pole, and her eyes sparkled at their silent tribute.
"It's been here,"
Wolf announced seriously. You're certain? Aunt Pole demanded. He nodded.
I could feel the memory of its passage in the very stones.
Did it come by sea? She asked.
No. He probably came ashore with it in some secluded cove up the coast, and then traveled here by land.
And took ship again? Farmo says, I like that she's powerful and has all this gravitas and commanding aura, but she's also like to look pretty. I appreciate a woman who's badass but also enjoys pretty things. Yeah. That's, there's been a little bit of commentary on that, I think, in the most recent season of The Witcher. And took ship again?
I doubt that,
Wolf said.
I know him well. He's not comfortable on the sea. Besides which, Barak said, one word to King Anheg of Cherek would have put 100 warships on his trail. No one can hide on the sea from the ships of Cherek, and he knows that. You're right, Wolf agreed. I think he'll avoid the domains of the Alorns. That's probably why he chose not to pass along the North Road through Algaria and Drasnia. The spirit of Belar is strong in the kingdoms of the Alorns, and not even this thief is bold enough to risk a confrontation with the bear god.
Which leaves Arendia, Silk said, or the land of the Ulgos.
Arendia, I think, Wolf said. The wrath of Ul is even more fearsome than that of Belar.
Forgive me, Dernick said, his eyes still on Aunt Pole. This is all most confusing. I've never heard just exactly who this thief is. I feel like I've lost his voice entirely here. Blech.
I'm sorry, gentle Dernick, Wolf said. It's not a good idea to speak his name. He has certain powers which might make it possible for him to know our every move if we alert him to our location, and he can hear his name spoken 1,000 leagues away.
A sorcerer? That was wrong. A sorcerer? Dernick asked, unbelievingly. I don't know what's happened. I need a longer sentence from Dernick to get the voice back.
The word isn't one I'd choose.
There's definitely a typo there. It says, the words isn't one I'd choose.
The word isn't one I'd choose, Wolf said. It's a term used by men who don't understand that particular art. Instead, let's call him Thief, though there are a few other names I might call him which are far less kindly.
Can we be certain that he'll make for the kingdoms of the Angarax? Silk asked, frowning. If that's the case, wouldn't it be quicker to take ship directly to Tol Honeth and pick up his trail on the South Caravan route into Cthul Murgos? Wolf shook his head.
Better to stay with this trail now that we've found it. We don't know what he intends. Maybe he wants to keep the thing he's stolen for himself, rather than deliver it over to the Grolims. He might even seek sanctuary in Nyissa.
He couldn't do that without the connivance of Salmistra, Aunt Pole said.
It wouldn't be the first time that the Queen of the Serpent People has tampered with things that are none of her concern, Wolf pointed out.
If that turns out to be true, Aunt Pole said grimly, I think I'll give myself the leisure to deal with the snake woman permanently. Well, Aunt Pole.
It's too early to know, Wolf said. Tomorrow we'll buy provisions and ferry across the river to Arendia. I'll take up the trail there. For the time being, all we can do is follow that trail. Once we know for certain where it leads, we'll be able to consider our alternatives.
From the evening-darkened inn-yard outside, there came suddenly the sound of many hooves. Barak stepped quickly to the window and glanced out.
"Soldiers,"
he said shortly. Dernick's voice has changed because of Aunt Pole. "Here," Silk said, also hurrying to the window.
"They appear to be from one of the king's regiments,"
Barak said. "They won't be interested in us," Aunt Pole said. "Unless they aren't what they seem," Silk said. "Uniforms of one kind or another aren't that difficult to come by."
"They aren't Murgos,"
Barak said.
"I'd recognize Murgos."
"Brill isn't a Murgo either," Silk said, staring down into the inn-yard.
"See if you can hear what they say,"
Wolf instructed. Barak carefully opened one of the windows a crack, and the candles all flickered in the gust of icy wind. In the yard below, the captain of the soldiers was speaking with the innkeeper. "He's a man of somewhat more than medium height, with white hair and a short white beard. He may be traveling with some others." "There's such a one here, your honor," the innkeeper said dubiously. "But I'm sure he isn't the one you seek. This one is chief steward to the Duchess of Erat, who honors my inn with her presence." "The Duchess of where?" the captain asked sharply. "Of Erat," the innkeeper replied. "A most noble lady of great beauty and a commanding presence." "I wonder if I might have a word with her grace," the captain said, climbing down from his horse. "I'll ask if she'll receive your honor," the innkeeper replied. Barak closed the window.
"I'll deal with this meddlesome captain,"
he said firmly.
"No," Wolf said. "He's got too many soldiers with him, and if they're who they seem to be, they're good men who haven't done us any harm."
"There's the back stairs," Silk suggested. "We could be 3 streets away before he reached our door." "And if he stationed soldiers at the back of the inn," Aunt Pole suggested, "what then? Since he's coming to speak with the Duchess of Erat, why don't we let the Duchess deal with him?"
"What have you got in mind?"
Wolf asked. "If the rest of you stay out of sight, I'll speak with him," she said. "I should be able to put him off until morning. We can be across the river into Arendia before he comes back."
"Perhaps," Wolf said, "but this captain sounds like a determined man."
"I've dealt with determined men before," she said. "We'll have to decide quickly," Silk said from the door. "He's on the stairs right now."
"We'll try it your way, Pole,"
Wolf said, opening the door to the next chamber. "Geryon," Aunt Pole said, "you stay here. A duchess wouldn't be unattended." Wolf and the others quickly left the room. "What do you want me to do, Aunt Pole?" Geryon whispered. "Just remember that you're my page, dear," she said, seating herself in a large chair near the center of the room and carefully arranging the folds of her gown. "Stand near my chair and try to look attentive. I'll take care of the rest." "Yes, my lady," Geryon said. The captain, when he arrived behind the innkeeper's knock, proved to be a tall, sober-looking man with penetrating gray eyes. Geryon, trying his best to sound officious, requested the soldier's name and then turned to Aunt Pole. There's a Captain Brendig to see you, Your Grace, he announced. He says that it's a matter of importance. Aunt Pole looked at him for a moment, as if considering the request. Oh, very well, she said finally. Show him in. Captain Brendig stepped into the room, and the innkeeper left hurriedly. Your Grace, the captain said, bowing deferentially to Aunt Pole. What is it, Captain? She demanded. I would not trouble your Grace if my mission were not of such urgency, Brendig apologized. My orders are directly from the king himself, and you, of all people, will know that we must defer to his wishes. Brendig? Ben, hey, what are you doing? Distract him with treats. What are you doing, puppy? Oh, dropped one. I'm gonna toss it in your bed. You ready? In there. In there. It's in your bed. They're in your bed. He doesn't know where they are. He'll find them eventually. Oh, he found them. I'm way out of focus. I don't know what happened there. Over here. We're over here. Look, it's my face. Look at my handsome face. Oh, wow. Camera, focus up, please. Pay attention. Back here. I don't know. Oh, there we go. There's the puppy. There's me. Sharky say, there's the king now. Bark, bark. Alright. Where was I? Before I was so rudely interrupted. Yeah. I'm going to start over with Brendig and try and give him a little bit more of a voice. I feel like he should be a little more carrot-ish, huh? I would not trouble your grace if my mission were not of such urgency, Brendig apologized. Is that better? My orders are directly from the king himself, and you, of all people, will know that we must defer to his wishes. I suppose I can spare you a few moments for the king's business, she said. There's a certain man the king wishes to have apprehended, Brendig said. An elderly man with white hair and beard. I'm informed that you have such a one among your servants. Is the man a criminal? She asked. The king didn't say so, your grace, he told her. I was only told that the man was to be seized and delivered to the palace at Sendar, and all who are with him as well. I am seldom at court, Aunt Pole said. It's most unlikely that any of my servants would be of such interest to the king. Your grace, Brendig said delicately, in addition to my duties in one of the king's own regiments, I also have the honor to hold a baronetcy. I've been at court all my life, and must confess that I've never seen you there. A lady of your striking appearance would not be soon forgotten. Aunt Pole inclined her head slightly in acknowledgment of the compliment. I suppose I should have guessed, my Lord Brendig, she said. Your manners are not those of a common soldier. Moreover, your grace, he continued, I'm familiar with all the holdings of the kingdom. If I'm not mistaken, the district of Erat is an earldom, and the Earl of Erat is a short, stout man. My great-uncle, incidentally. There has been no duchy in that part of Sendaria since the kingdom was under the dominion of the Wasite Erands. Aunt Pole fixed him with an icy stare. My lady, Brendig said, almost apologetically, the Wassite Eddings were exterminated by their Asturian cousins in the last years of the third millennium. There has been no Wassite nobility for over 2,000 years. I thank you for the history lesson, my lord, Aunt Pole said coldly. All of that, however, is hardly the issue, is it? Brendig continued. I am bidden by my king to seek out the man of whom I spoke. Upon your honor, lady, do you know such a man? The question hung in the air between them, and Geryon, knowing in sudden panic that they were caught, almost shouted for Barak. Then the door to the next chamber opened, and Mr. Wolf stepped into the room. There's no need to continue with this, he said. I'm the one you're looking for. What does Fulrach of Sendaria want with me? Fulrach of Sendaria. Brendig looked at him without seeming surprise. His Majesty did not see fit to take me into his confidence, he said. He will explain it himself, I have no doubt, as soon as we reach the palace at Sendar. The sooner the better, then, Wolf said. When do we leave? We depart for Sendar directly after breakfast in the morning, Brendig said. I will accept your word that none of you will attempt to leave this inn during the night. I'd prefer not to subject the Duchess of Erat to the indignity of confinement at the local barracks. The cells there are most uncomfortable, I'm told. You have my word, Mr. Wolf said. Thank you, Brendig said, bowing slightly. I must also advise you that I am obliged to post guards about this inn. For your protection, of course. Your solicitude overwhelms us, my lord, Aunt Pole said dryly. Your servant, my lady, Brendig said, with a formal bow. And then he turned and left the room. The polished door was only wood. Geryon knew that, but as soon as it closed behind the departing Brendig, it seemed to have that dreadful final clang of the door to a dungeon. And that is the end of chapter 10. It's actually a bit of a longer chapter, because even though we had already read part of it, it's already past 8 o'clock. Oh. Developments! They're being taken to the king of Sendaria. Fulrach of Sendar. Fulrach of Sendar, Fulrach of Sendaria. Fulrach of Sendaria. Interesting that Mr. Wolf refers to him by the first name. And that bit with Brendig about the Earl of Erat also happens to be my uncle. Aunt Pole's disguise didn't last too long. Parmo says, just so polite about it. It's interesting, Duchess, that Erat happens to be an earldom. Isn't that strange? Anyways, please come see the king. Sharky say, figures they got the one guy who could call her bluff. Yeah. Figures that they got visited by a noble who apparently studies the family trees. Not that you need to study the family tree to know your own uncle necessarily, but Brendig is an interesting character. You know, they got the captain of the guard, but he's not your typical just blunt sergeant type, you know, stereotypical captain. He's a little more sophisticated. somewhat diplomatic. I don't know. As a new character, I appreciate that he's not the same as everyone else, and that he's not just, you know, soldier. Oh. Pharma says, guard captains for large cities not surprised to have land holdings. Well, and specifically belonging to the king's regiment. So apparently somewhat more dignified than the palace guards of Ankh-Morpork, to nobody's surprise anywhere. Yes, king's guard captain. Whoop. We still going okay? Looks like it's working. Okay, I just had buffering on my end of the stream for a moment there. So I think that's probably a good place to stop, because it's 12 after 8 now. We're on page 138 at the beginning of chapter 11. So, let's see, 138 out of 262. We are officially just past halfway through the book. I think that that is the first time I'm saying that, because I think at the beginning of chapter 10 we weren't there yet. That was a bit of a longer chapter. I went from page 119 to 138. So congratulations, everyone. We're halfway through Pawn of Prophecy. Yay! Hopefully it's been enjoyable. Definitely a different pace. I think a different pace than all of the books we've read so far. Because the Hobbit didn't really visit so many cities. And The Hobbit, I think, had more fantastical encounters per page count, I think. You know, by this point in The Hobbit, we'd had encounters with trolls, and we might have been reaching, like, Mirkwood. So if that's the case, we probably would have encountered, what's his name? The skin shifter. Mr. Sharkey is enjoying the road tripness of this book. Pharma says this is more of an urban road trip. Yeah. So it's a different pace, but I feel like it's also got much more character development than the previous books we've read. Sharky say The Hobbit did have this much lore behind it, but if all you read was The Hobbit, you wouldn't know it. Well, when The Hobbit came out, initially, when The Hobbit was initially published, it didn't have all that lore, right? At the time of The Hobbit's publication. But yeah, I feel like this book has had a lot more sort of face time with the various characters. And I feel like the author, I feel like David Eddings is making it a point to show us. Chucky say, well, it probably lived in Tolkien's head. It may have. I feel like David Eddings is taking the time to be like, okay, this is Garion's sort of spending time with each of these characters and learning more about them, and learning that they are more than the first appearances led him to see them as. Sorry, that was an awkward sentence. But, you know, he spends time with Silk, and at first he's afraid of Silk, and then he starts to like Silk, and they have conversations, and he learns things from Silk. Yeah, and now he's spent some time with Barak, and he's learning some stuff from Barak. He's learning how to use a sword, at least once. From the way it's described, like when it's, when Garion's arms started to get tired from swinging the sword, and from my experience, it doesn't take that long to get tired from swinging a sword the first time you do it. But, I don't know, maybe Garion's stronger than I am. Plus, he's a kid, and he's younger, because we established that he's like, I think he's 14 or 15 at this point, right? And, I don't know. Recovery isn't always that hard when you're that young. He did grow up on a farm, that's true. And he's learning more about Aunt Pole and Mr. Wolf, although not so directly. We haven't had much time with Dernick for a while. Just get the occasional interactions with him. But then again, Garion already knows Dernick. So that's something that I feel like is quite lacking in The Hobbit, is you've got all of these characters, but the dwarfs are mostly just treated as kind of a group. You get bits of personality from most of them, but you usually only get 1 or 2 points or things, right? Biffer and Boffer have the tinderbox. That's almost the personality, right? Bomber is fat and complains and likes food. Other than obviously Thorin Oakenshield, like, you don't get a huge amount of most of them. So that's definitely a bit different in this one. The cast is the primary cast so far has been a bit smaller. There's been lots of kind of side characters and things like that. Lots of them, probably, again, more than in The Hobbit. But the primary cast is a bit smaller, but you get a lot more time with each of them, and more development of their personalities, I feel like. And that'll continue. Spoiler warning, but that's going to continue. We'll get more and more character development and things like that, which is something that I love about these books. But next, we're going to meet the king. And so, what do you think the king might want with Mr. Wolf? We'll find out, probably in the next chapter. So, there's my stinger. That's the right term, right? For next Friday, when we get to chapter 11, there may be some development. You don't want to miss it, huh? Mr. Sharkey says the king wants to know the time. Farmo says the king wants a story. That's true. That could be true. He may want a story. I hope that everyone can make it next Friday. Day after tomorrow. It'll be the 7th. Because I do think there's some interesting stuff to come. Farmo says, I heard you told a king story to non-kings. Mr. Wolf? Storyteller? That's not allowed. You're going to have to answer to the union for this. 2 weeks dungeon. So the Storytellers Guild. Sharky say Friday is Ukrainian Christmas. We'll be here with our pierogies. Oh man. Wonder if we can find some gluten-free pierogies. We had some pierogies within the past few months, but we don't have them very often. Farmos can't eat gluten, and it's not as easy to find gluten-free pierogies. It's possible though, and they were decent. They were pretty good if I remember correctly. So maybe we'll have some ourselves. I'm way out of focus for this. No wheats for me. No wheats for meats. What? What does that mean? Did you forget meat was a thing? Another food? Maybe if it had been E, like two E's, M-E-E-T-S. Meat is still a word, but it would have been less of an association than meat. But wheat is spelled with an E. I needed to make that noise. And I'm typing. Alright. Well, it's 8:20. I think that was a good chapter. I enjoyed it. Some more, we had that FaceTime with Barrick. I think got a little bit more of his personality. And apparently they have found the trail. Why do I keep going out of focus? Found the trail of whatever it was that they are following this whole time. See if that works. No? Didn't work. Which Garion suspects is maybe the Orb of Alder. Yeah, books. And Barak reaffirming that Garion doesn't seem to be a Sendar and doesn't exactly look like a Revan, but maybe somewhat like a Revan. Which, you know, is new information. But not precisely like a Revan. So more mystery as to who is Garion? What is Garion? Where is Garion from? Why is Garion? And most importantly, how is Garion? There it is. Farmo says it. Alright. Well, have a good night, everyone. Happy Wednesday. Happy New Year. Happy book. Hopefully I'll see you on Friday, and we can get to chapter 11. Maybe we'll learn a little more as the mystery unfolds. Oh, let me just check quickly. Lily was streaming, but I don't see it right now. I don't know anyone else that's doing anything, so I'm just going to end it here. Alright. Have a good night. Bye-bye. Happy 2022. Hope it's a good year. Good night. Wow.